It was never meant to be just a house. It was a statement built by one of the world's richest families to defy time itself. But behind its walls of gold and marble, something far more human was unraveling. Ambition, isolation, and a secret that nearly erased it all. What really happened inside the Rothschilds' Palace of Perfection? The answer has been hidden for over a century, until now. We'll explain everything in this video, step by step. Don't skip it. This was Waddesdon Manor, a palace born not of kings or conquerors, but of a banker's dream. Ferdinand de Rothschild had envisioned more than walls and windows. He had imagined a living testament to beauty, power, and the meticulous curation of the world's finest treasures. The house itself seemed to breathe, each turret and spire a statement of wealth, each carved detail a whisper of obsession. Yet behind its grandeur, beyond the symmetry and gilded cornices, the story was far more intimate, far more human than any visitor could ever guess. The foundation stones were laid with precision, almost ritualistic. Craftsmen labored under watchful eyes, their hammers and chisels echoing like a heartbeat through the early mornings. Ferdinand's vision was exacting. Nothing could be left to chance. Every doorway, every window frame, every curve of a balcony had to speak to the same narrative, that of a house both magnificent and personal, a canvas for a life lived in meticulous pursuit of perfection. Yet with perfection came strain. The people who built this dream often carried it on their shoulders in silence, sweat mingling with stone dust, pride warring with exhaustion. And Ferdinand, for all his charm and cultivated elegance, was a man who demanded not just excellence, but devotion, an emotional tether invisible yet unbreakable, binding who entered this unfolding palace into the orbit of his ambition. Inside, the rooms unfolded like chapters in a story nobody had yet read. Heavy tapestries softened the echoes of footsteps, their threads alive with color and narrative. Chandeliers hung like frozen fountains, crystal droplets catching light and scattering it across polished floors. Furniture gleamed as though in conversation with the soft rays that fell through stained glass, each piece selected not only for beauty but for the story. It carried an 18th-century cabinet from Paris, a delicate clock from Vienna, a portrait whose eyes seemed to follow you as you walked past. Ferdinand collected not merely objects, but whispers of lives long gone, echoes of art and craft meant to communicate across centuries. And yet, in the quiet corners of these rooms, there was another story of longing, of solitude, of the weight of a dream that demanded sacrifice. The gardens, sprawling and immaculate, were no less a testament to vision. Sculpted lawns rolled into formal terraces, fountains murmured in languages of water and stone, and roses climbed in deliberate chaos along wrought iron arches. Here, nature bent to the will of man, and yet there was a sense of tension beneath the symmetry. Every hedge, trimmed with obsessive precision, every path angled to frame a distant vista, carried a kind of quiet tyranny. For Ferdinand, beauty was never casual, it was earned, negotiated through endless labor, through hours that stretched into nights. The gardeners, tireless in their devotion, often moved like shadows, leaving no trace but the perfection of the grounds. And the Baron himself, wandering among his roses, felt the thrill of creation but also the gnawing ache of impermanence. The flowers would bloom, the fountains would run, but the obsession could never be fully sated. Even in the laughter of guests, the grand dinners and sparkling soirees that became the legend of Waddesdon, there was tension, invisible yet palpable. Nobility, diplomats, artists, and collectors all came to marvel at the house and its treasures, to be seen within its rooms of opulent splendor. They admired the chandeliers, the porcelain, the tapestries, yet few could imagine the quiet toll exacted by such display. Servants moved with the precision of clockwork, their faces calm, their hands steady. Yet beneath, lives were measured by the rhythm of a house that never truly slept. Guests glimpsed the glitter, the orchestrated laughter, the exquisite table settings, but they could not hear the muted sighs of those who labored endlessly to maintain the illusion of effortless elegance. And Ferdinand, despite the crowds and admiration, often felt himself alone, a solitary conductor in a symphony of brilliance that demanded constant attention. Art for him was more than decoration. It was a lifeline, a means to impose order on a world of uncertainty. Paintings were hung with care that bordered on ritual, each brushstroke analyzed, each frame placed to create dialogue across centuries. Sculpture and porcelain were displayed not merely for beauty, but to provoke thought, to evoke emotions that transcended time. And yet, the deeper one looked, the more one could see the cracks in the perfection. Letters hidden in the lining of cabinets revealed doubts, fleeting moments of despair. Even as the mansion stood as a testament to triumph, there was evidence of the human cost behind the gold leaf and marble floors. Obsession, like ivy, had crept through the life of the Baron, entwining his ambition with loneliness, his need for control with a fear of impermanence. The construction of Waddesdon was also a tale of contradiction. While grand halls showcased European craftsmanship, the materials themselves came at hidden costs. Stones quarried with back-breaking effort, woods felled and carved across borders, artisans imported from distant cities, all converged to create a seamless vision. Yet every acquisition carried a human story, workers far from home, exhausted, unseen, craftsmen perfecting details that would never bear their names, couriers and dealers navigating markets with the quiet tension of secrecy. And Ferdinand, for all his meticulous planning, understood instinctively that to gather such beauty there must be sacrifice, that the luxury of art was inseparable from the invisible labor and quiet endurance of countless individuals. Even the air inside Waddesdon seemed charged with expectation. Every corridor, every stairwell, resonated with the silent anticipation of a master who sought nothing less than transcendence. Light spilled across floors in the mornings, catching dust motes like suspended gold, while in the evenings the house seemed to sigh, settling into itself, holding the echoes of footsteps and conversation in its high ceilings. Visitors might feel awe, even reverence, but beneath the surface, the pulse of human tension remained, subtle yet insistent, reminding all who lingered that the dream of a palace was never merely stone and glass. It was the orchestration of hearts, hands, and the fragile endurance of a single visionary will. Ferdinand, as dream, finally, was also a mirror of himself. Every room, every garden, every carefully chosen object reflected his aspiration, his insecurities, his longing for permanence in a world of impermanence. The house was a stage upon which he performed his ideals, yet within it, he remained a man intimately aware of mortality, of the fleeting nature of beauty, of the solitude that always accompanies ambition. And for those who walked its halls, who peered behind the velvet curtains, polished surfaces, Waddesdon offered not only splendor, but a quiet, unspoken understanding that the grandeur of a palace is inseparable from the human story of longing, of obsession, of sacrifice that shape it from the inside out. The walls of Waddesdon Manor do not merely enclose space, they breathe with the weight of lives, ambitions, and secrets long kept from the world. In the golden glow of afternoon light, the stone seems almost alive, textured with the history of countless hands that shaped it, polished it, and adorned it with care. Yet beneath the surface perfection, the house hums with something far less tangible, a resonance of obsession that reaches into every corridor, every ornate archway. To walk these halls is to step into a living diary, one written not on paper, but in the echoes of footsteps, in the careful tilt of chandeliers, in the precise alignment of tapestries that cover the walls like silent sentinels. Each surface holds a story, each room a fragment of desire and devotion, and each whisper of the past hints at what it cost to create this fragile paradise. In the grand entrance, sunlight falls across polished floors, bouncing off carved banisters and gilded moldings. It is easy to be deceived here, to imagine effortless elegance, to see only the grandeur of wealth made manifest. But the beauty conceals the intensity of control required to maintain it. Ferdinand de Rothschild's presence lingers in the arrangement of every object, the measured symmetry of furniture, the exacting positioning of paintings so that one glance brings harmony, and yet also unease. It is a house designed to impress, to overwhelm, and to dominate not merely the senses of guests, but the rhythm of life within it. Staff move like cogs in a living mechanism, the slightest misstep noted by an invisible eye. Even the walls seem to watch, their smooth surfaces absorbing the tension, the tiny act of fatigue, the quiet sighs of humans laboring to uphold a vision that can never rest. The dining hall stretches long, its vaulted ceilings painted with allegory of triumph and conquest, yet there is a paradox in the perfection. Behind every glittering silver tray, every crystal goblet is the painstaking choreography of countless servants, each step rehearsed, each gesture precise. The Baron's insistence on exactitude transformed ordinary labor into something almost sacred, but also something isolating. Mistakes were never openly criticized. They were folded into the silence of expectation, carried invisibly by those who labored in service of beauty, and the guests, unaware of the strain, spoke in hushed tones of the house's magnificence, unaware that their admiration was stitched into the very fabric of someone else's exhaustion. The walls, for all their marble and plaster, held memory. They absorbed devotion, they witnessed longing. They bore the imprint of lives quietly bent to the will of obsession. Rooms meant for leisure and entertainment often felt like stages. Chandeliers sparkled above, their crystal prisms refracting light into 1,000 facets, dazzling the eye, but also amplifying the sense of scrutiny. Every curtain, every patterned rug, was chosen with meticulous care, each color a note in an unspoken symphony of control. Ferdinand moved through these spaces with the deliberate precision of a man performing a ritual, measuring, adjusting, approving, as if the house itself were an extension of his psyche. And yet, in this perfection, there was fragility. A misaligned tapestry, a dusty vase, a crooked candlestick, these were more than minor flaws. They threatened the illusion, and with it, the careful order that allowed the Baron to feel mastery over his world. The obsession was invisible yet palpable, a tension that seeped into the air, the silence, and even the shadows cast by the late afternoon sun. The libraries were quieter still, sanctuaries of intellect and aesthetic devotion. Rows upon rows of leather-bound volumes reflected candlelight with a muted sheen. Each book, each manuscript, was placed not only for visual harmony but for intellectual dialogue with its neighbors, a conversation across time and space curated with obsessive care. The Baron moved among them with reverence, but also with a restless hand, adjusting the alignment of spines, straightening bookmarks, ensuring that nothing disrupted the perfection he envisioned. Here, the human cost of obsession became almost tangible. Scholars and visitors marveled at the collection, never noticing the weight of solitude, the quiet anxiety of a mind that could not rest until every detail was exact. The walls themselves seemed to echo with the Baron's own meticulousness, absorbing his need for control, his fear that beauty left unattended might unravel. Even the bedrooms, places meant for rest, were charged with intensity. Velvet drapes muted the outside world. Gilded mirrors reflected the light in careful angle, and the furniture seemed to assert its authority over those who dwelled there. Ferdinand's vision of perfection extended into sleep and private space. Even in moments of supposed intimacy or reprieve, there was an awareness that the house was alive, responsive, demanding attention. Servants moved silently in the background, anticipating needs before they were voiced, and in doing so, they carried the weight of invisible labor, the quiet surrender to an environment that demanded both admiration and obedience. And within these rooms, away from the eyes of society, the Baron's own vulnerability flickered. A subtle acknowledgement that even in a palace of splendor, obsession carries a solitary burden. The corridors themselves were long and winding, sometimes leading unexpectedly from one gallery to another, sometimes opening onto hidden staircases or service areas unseen by guests. These passageways became arteries through which the pulse of the house flowed, carrying both the visible rituals of daily life and the invisible currents of tension. A misplaced step, a whispered instruction, a fleeting look of disapproval, all registered in the atmosphere, invisible yet undeniable. The walls had seen it all, and in their stone and plaster memory they held traces of human emotion, awe, anxiety, devotion, quiet despair, and fleeting triumph. Visitors, wandering through with a sense of enchantment, could feel it in subtle ways, the tightness in the air, the almost imperceptible hum of attention, the sense that something more intimate and profound was quietly at play beneath the glittering surface. The Baron's obsession extended beyond objects and walls to the very concept of legacy. Each decision, each acquisition, each arrangement was a meditation on immortality, a defiance of time itself. And yet, in striving for permanence, there was an acute awareness of fragility. The house, no matter how grand, could not exist without the devotion of those who tended it, without the meticulous labor of unseen hands. And so obsession became both a shield and a cage, an insistence on order that protected beauty, yet isolated the man who imagined it. Even the walls, bearing witness, seemed to carry a consciousness of this paradox, a subtle rhythm of expectation, reverence, and quiet surrender. Visitors often leave Waddesdon with the memory of its brilliance, of rooms and gardens that seem impossibly perfect. But those who linger in the corners, who notice the small details, the ever so slight misalignment, the shadows that shift differently than expected, the air that seems charged with something almost alive, sense that perfection is not without its cost. The walls whisper of unseen labor, of human lives shaped by devotion and tension, of a mind that could never rest until beauty was absolute. They remind us that obsession, while dazzling, carries weight, that the creation of splendor is inseparable from sacrifice, and that even in the most elegant spaces, the human heart leaves traces that endure long after the voices have faded. In Waddesdon, every hall, every chamber, every quiet corner holds a secret. The walls themselves seem to breathe, to remember, to carry forward the echoes of those who walked before. Their whispers are subtle, almost imperceptible, yet insistent, a reminder that the grandeur of a palace is not merely in its stone and ornamentation, but in the lives, emotions, and relentless pursuit of perfection that brought it into being. They bear witness to the intensity of obsession, the quiet devotion of countless unseen hands, and the delicate, often lonely heartbeat of the man who dreamed it all. Evening fell like a velvet curtain over the rolling hills of Waddesdon, softening the outlines of the manor yet setting its lights ablaze with a golden glow. Candles flickered in every window, casting dancing shadows that stretched across lawns and terraces, reaching into the gardens with an almost predatory curiosity. Inside, the house seemed to exhale, preparing itself for a night of spectacle, a performance where the line between grandeur and grief would blur, where beauty itself could both dazzle and imprison. The air smelled faintly of polished wood, wax, and the subtle sweetness of fresh flowers, a fragrance meticulously maintained to impress, to seduce, to suggest perfection. Yet beneath the surface elegance there was tension, nearly imperceptible, like the quiet tremor in a stringed instrument before the first note. This was not just a house, it was a theater, and everyone within it, host, guest, servant alike, played a role in a drama orchestrated with obsessive care. The dining hall, the heart of every grand event, glowed under the weight of crystal chandeliers. Silver trays gleamed like mirrors, reflecting more than light they reflected: expectation, anticipation, and an unspoken hierarchy of attention. Guests arrived dressed in silks and satins, their jewelry catching candlelight in a chorus of discreet sparkle, their laughter carefully measured, rehearsed, as though the walls themselves had taught them the rhythm. Each step they took, each gesture they offered, was absorbed by the mare, catalogued invisibly by its quiet consciousness. Servants glided through the room like shadows, their movements choreographed to maintain an illusion of effortlessness. Yet each smile, each carefully tilted plate, carried the invisible strain of exhaustion and devotion. The grandeur was immediate, intoxicating, but the cost lingered like a faint undertone. Beauty exacted a price, and no one within the house, no matter how brilliant or admired, could escape its toll. Music began, first faint, then swelling into a rich tapestry of strings and harpsichords. The notes rose and fell, echoing through the vaulted ceilings, filling every corner, yet also magnifying the invisible tension beneath the surface. Guests lifted goblets, conversed in subdued tones, and marveled at the art and tapestries that lined the walls, unaware that each brushstroke, each carefully selected piece, had been chosen with almost religious precision. Ferdinand moved among them, a conductor of spectacle, ensuring harmony, order, and the perfection of perception. And yet, even as he smiled, the corners of his eyes betrayed something quieter, a sharp awareness of isolation, of the fragile line between admiration and emptiness. For all the laughter and applause, there was an understanding, private and unspoken, that the grandeur of the night could never fill the silent chambers of the heart. In the libraries adjoining the halls, small groups gathered to discuss art, politics, and literature, their voices hushed yet fervent. Here, conversation was not casual, it was a dance, a subtle negotiation of intellect and status. Guests sought approval, recognition, or simply the thrill of inclusion in an elite narrative, while Ferdinand observed with acute attention, evaluating not only their words but their intentions, their gestures, the unspoken politics of presence. And in this careful observation, the weight of the house's obsession became apparent. It demanded not just admiration, but compliance, a surrender of ego to the invisible standards set by one man's vision of perfection. Those who failed, even in minor ways, felt the subtle recoil of attention, the almost imperceptible tightening of the air. The walls, absorbing these tensions, seemed to pulse, resonating with every unspoken thought, every carefully hidden anxiety, every moment of restrained desire. Outside, the gardens were illuminated with lanterns that made pathways glow like veins of light through darkened foliage. Guests wandered under arches of climbing roses and along fountains that whispered in soft, hypnotic rhythms. The beauty of the landscape was seductive, almost otherworldly, yet the perfection was exacting, a constant reminder that nature here had been disciplined, curated, and controlled. Every trimmed hedge, every positioned statue, was a testament to labor invisible to the untrained eye. And among the guests, some noticed the subtle signs of this human orchestration, the slight stiffness in a gardener's posture, the careful avoidance of misaligned petals, the near-sacred attention given to every detail. They did not realize that the thrill of splendor depended entirely on these silent efforts, on the devotion and exhaustion that remained unseen, yet indispensable to the mask of beauty. Even the private chambers of the manor contributed to the masquerade, where fleeting moments of intimacy and vulnerability intertwined with performance. Behind closed doors, rooms gleamed with golden velvet, yet the air carried traces of longing, of solitude, of fleeting sorrow that no guest would ever witness. Letters hidden in drawers spoke of anxieties and melancholy, of nights spent haunted by the fragility of perfection. Ferdinand, despite the outward command of the spectacle, experienced these emotions acutely, a private acknowledgement that admiration alone could never satisfy a restless heart. The walls absorbed this too, holding in their plaster and stone the quiet sighs of a man both captivated and trapped by his own creation, a house that demanded devotion even as it promised glory. As the evening wore on, small fractures in the performance emerged, subtle yet significant. A misplaced napkin, a slightly uneven reflection in polished silver, the tiniest lapse in choreography, it was enough to disturb the delicate equilibrium. Servants adjusted in silence, correcting imperfections before any guest could notice their own exhaustion, masked beneath a veneer of calm. And in those moments, the human cost of obsession became undeniable. The grandeur of the night, the brilliance of the spectacle, depended entirely on vigilance, sacrifice, and the quiet surrender of those who labored in service of artifice. Each perfection achieved carried with it a shell, a reminder that beauty, no matter how dazzling, is inseparable from the strain of those who maintain it. The laughter and conversation eventually gave way to softer music, and the guests, feeling both dazzled and fatigued, began to drift toward the exits. Candles flickered low, casting long shadows across polished floors and carved paneling. The gardens grew darker, the fountain's whispers more intimate, carrying the quiet murmur of human emotion into the night. In the silence that followed, the house exhaled again, releasing the tension accumulated over hours of performance. And yet, the pulse of obsession lingered, subtle but insistent, a reminder that Waddesdon was more than a setting for parties. It was a repository of human longing, devotion, and fragile triumphs. Every corner, every hallway, every whisper of the air seemed to testify to the cost of beauty, hidden sacrifices, and the quiet melancholy that intertwined with even the most dazzling spectacle. The Baron, alone for a moment in the dimming light, traced a finger along the edge of a table, the gesture both tender and possessive. He had curated every element of this night, every brushstroke of impression, yet he understood, in a way no guest could, that the brilliance of splendor was inseparable from the shadows it cast. The house, magnificent and exacting, was a mirror of his own psyche, commanding, disciplined, beautiful, and haunted. And within its walls, as they seemed to breathe and murmur in the aftermath of performance, the quiet sorrow remained, coexisting with triumph, a reminder that, even in celebration, obsession leaves its mark, and even in the midst of dazzling company, solitude is never far. The masquerade was over, but the echoes lingered, footsteps faded, voices softened, but the tension remained embedded in the walls, in the polished floors, in the very air of the house. Every reflection, every shadow, every object seemed charged with both the beauty of the night and the invisible human cost that sustained it. Guests departed carrying memories of elegance and charm, yet unseen, behind each smile and measured gesture, the quiet labor, the meticulous devotion, and the subtle melancholy persisted. The manor itself seemed alive, holding within its walls the intertwined narratives of splendor and sorrow, a delicate balance of desire and restraint, brilliance and quiet ache, orchestrated with obsessive care and preserved for eternity. The gardens of Waddesdon Manor, bathed in early morning mist, held a stillness that seemed almost sacred. Dew clung to the petals of roses and the tips of meticulously trimmed box hedges, each droplet catching the first rays of sunlight and turning them into tiny stars suspended in the air. The fountains, silent now, bore the memory of their ceaseless murmur, their waters that once danced to orchestrated rhythms, now holding their breath, in frozen anticipation. There was a profound hush over the landscape, a silence that felt heavy, charged with unseen emotion. It was a stillness that came not from peace, but from the exhaustion of constant vigilance. The gardens, so alive during the hours of celebration and admiration, now revealed the quiet labor that maintained their perfection. And in that revelation lay a subtle ache, a reminder that beauty is not born but forged through endless human toil. Each path was a ribbon of carefully laid stone, lined with flowers chosen for color, fragrance, and the subtle dialogue they created with neighboring beds. Yet for all their order, there was a weight of solitude here, sense that the gardens themselves bore witness to unseen fatigue. Gardeners moved like ghosts through the hedgerows, trails in hand, shaping nature to conform to human vision. Their movements were deliberate, silent, almost reverent, each clipping and pruning a meditation on control. Behind every petal, every trimmed leaf, there was the imprint of a mind driven to maintain a fleeting perfection. Ferdinand had envisioned not only beauty, but an idealized order, world where even nature obeyed the subtle discipline of human will. And in pursuing that ideal, he exacted more than devotion. He demanded endurance, attention, and a constant surrender to the invisible rhythms of expectation. The statues, cold and silent, seemed to observe the human toil with a detached dignity. Marble eyes, polished and smooth, gazed eternally across lawns and terraces, never blinking, never yielding. They were placed with intention, positioned to draw the eye, to create balance, to inspire awe. Yet their perfection was a reminder of fragility. The slightest imperfection, a misaligned flower, a bent branch, a stone out of place, threatened the illusion, even if only for a moment. And those tending the grounds carried that threat quietly, walking through the gardens as if on a tightrope, their awareness of every detail heightened by the constant presence of expectation. The beauty of the space, intoxicating to outsiders, was inseparable from the tension that sustained. The human vigilance that made silence not merely a pause but a condition of survival. Morning light revealed hidden corners where time seemed to linger differently, where shadows clung longer, and the air carried a chill that touched more than the skin. In these quiet spaces, the unspoken stories of the manor emerged. The gardeners, often unseen, were themselves participants in a drama as subtle as the play of sunlight across a fountain. Their labor went unnoticed by guests who marveled at roses and statues alike, yet every bloom, every line of clipped hedge, was a testament to their silent endurance. The Baron himself understood this, walking among the paths with measured steps, his presence a reminder that every detail mattered, that beauty demanded vigilance, and that perfection, however dazzling, could not exist without devotion. And in that devotion there was a quiet tension, an invisible cost woven into the very fabric of the landscape. The air carried scents, wet earth, roses, lavender layered with the faint fragrance of old stone, warmed by the sun. It was intoxicating, yet it also hinted at something deeper, the fragility of what was maintained. Each flower would bloom and fade, each fountain's rhythm would falter without care, and each hedge could lose its shape in a single night of neglect. The gardens, magnificent and seemingly eternal, were in truth dependent on constant human attention. In their silence, they revealed both beauty and vulnerability, the coexistence of triumph and quiet sorrow. Even the Baron, despite his authority and vision, felt the weight of impermanence here. Each walk through the gardens was a reminder that control was temporary, that the pursuit of perfection was an ongoing negotiation with time, with nature, and with the invisible currents of human effort. There were moments when the Baron paused at the edge of a reflecting pool, observing the mirrored sky and the careful geometry of pathways. He would trace the patterns with a finger, a gesture almost imperceptible, yet imbued with intense focus. In those pauses, one could sense the obsession that underlay every decision, every arrangement, every hidden calculation of color, form, and balance. The silence of the gardens amplified this obsession, allowing it to resonate beyond the visible, beyond the curated beauty. And in that resonance, there was a subtle melancholy, an acknowledgement that the grandeur of the space existed not for its own sake, but for the human mind's desire to impose order on a world defined by chaos and transience. The fountains, now quiet, had once been instruments of spectacle, their waters dancing in harmony with music, their sprays reflecting the shimmer of chandeliers inside the manor. They were reminders that even in celebration, effort remained invisible. Behind every leap of water, every arc of spray, there had been laborers tuning pumps adjusting valves and observing patterns with obsessive care. The spectacle was designed to dazzle, to inspire admiration, yet its underlying reality was the quiet endurance of human effort. And in the absence of performance, when silence returned, the hidden cost of beauty became perceptible, palpable, almost tangible. The gardens, now still, seemed to whisper that every triumph, no matter how magnificent, carries with it the memory of sacrifice. The rose arches, climbing toward the sky in deliberate patterns, were more than decoration. They were a metaphor for the fragile ascent of ambition, for the tension between freedom and control, growth and discipline. Gardeners moved beneath them, hands skilled, eyes trained, shaping the climbing stems to meet the exacting vision of their master. The flowers were spectacular, yet their splendor depended entirely on the invisible toil that preceded it. And as the Baron wandered among these arches, the quiet melancholy of creation was evident in his expression, a recognition that beauty, however dazzling, cannot exist without cost, cannot endure without vigilance, and cannot inspire awe without the quiet labor of devotion hidden from view. Even the air itself seemed infused with memory, as if the gardens absorbed the tension, the obsession, the human emotion that had built and maintained them over years. Footsteps of guests, laughter from evenings past, whispered conversations, fleeting glances, all seemed suspended in the mist that lingered over lawns and fountains. The silence was heavy with remembrance, charged with unspoken stories, and alive with the subtle hum of human effort rendered invisible. It was a silence that demanded attention, a reminder that beauty, while radiant, is inseparable from the devotion, sacrifice, and tension that sustain it. And when the sun rose fully, spilling light across the gardens in gold and green, the perfection was undeniable. Each petal, each trimmed hedge, each statue aligned with meticulous care. The spectacle was complete, yet the tension remained, embedded in every corner, every shadow, every breath of air. The Baron understood that even as visitors admired, even as accolades were whispered, and awe was expressed, the garden would demand vigilance and knew that perfection was temporary, fragile, and endlessly renewed through human devotion. And in that understanding, there was both triumph and sorrow, the coexistence of awe-inspiring beauty, and the invisible human cost that sustained it, a lesson written in petals, stone, and silence alike. Dust floats in the air like fragments of memory, drifting through the corridor of Waddesdon Manor, where time itself seems to pause between breaths. The morning light enters softly through tall, mullioned windows, illuminating moats that shimmer like gold suspended in silence. The air is heavy with history, the faint scent of old wood, of polished floors, of curtains that have absorbed a century of seasons. Each object, each painting, each forgotten trinket bears the touch of human hands long vanished. And in the hush of these rooms, one feels the strange intimacy of time, that everything magnificent was once alive with pulse and breath, and that every act of creation carries within it the inevitability of decay. The manor stands as both monument and memento, its beauty radiant yet fragile, its perfection quietly shadowed by the persistence of dust. In one of the galleries, sunlight glances across a marble bust, tracing the contours of an immortalized face. The eyes, carved from stone, seem to look past the prison, seeing perhaps the ambition of their creator, or perhaps nothing at all. Paintings line the walls, their pigments dulled slightly by years, their frames ornate and golden, like portals into vanished worlds. But beneath the gilt, the canvases whisper of the same human ache, the desire to be remembered. Ferdinand de Rothschild's dream was not simply to collect, it was to defy time, to trap beauty in permanence. Yet permanence is an illusion. The air that glides along these halls carries the quiet sigh of impermanence, a reminder that even the grandest legacy eventually turns to dust. And still, there is tenderness in that truth, for the dust is proof that something once shimmered, that something once mattered deeply enough to be built with devotion. The rooms breathe differently now. No servants hurry through doorways, no orchestras tune beneath chandeliers, no rustle of silk or laughter drifts across the air. Instead, there is the hum of preservation, the soft footsteps of curators, the muted sweep of brushes against frames, the careful hands that lift, mend, and polish. Their work is quieter, yet no less consuming than the labor of those who once served the living master. They tend to his ghost now, repairing the fragile scaffolding of memory. To them, each object is sacred, not for its monetary worth, but for the story it carries, the echo of obsession, the vibration of a hand, the evidence of care. And as they move through these corridors, They too become part of the story, their own devotion woven into the fabric of continuity, a human chain stretching across generations in silent reverence for what remains. Outside, the gardens shimmer beneath a pale sun. The fountains murmur again, the roses climb their arches, and visitors wander along gravel paths where the Baron once walked alone. Children's laughter mingles with the rustle of leaves, a sound so innocent it almost startles the air. They marvel at the splendor, unaware that beneath each flower lie roots of obsession and quiet endurance. The caretakers, still invisible in their diligence, guide nature's hand as once their predecessors did, trimming, shaping, restoring. The gardens continue to perform their ritual of rebirth, each season a reminder that beauty, though fragile, is never truly lost. It simply changes its form, passes from one generation of hands to another. And within that cycle lies a kind of grace, a surrender that transcends control. Inside, the library remains a sanctuary of silence. Leather-bound volumes line the shelves, their spines cracked and softened by touch. The faint musk of paper and ink fills the air, mingling with the cool scent of stone. Here, the Baron's ghost lingers most vividly. He had sought meaning among these pages, solace in words, perhaps a sense of order in their alignment. His handwriting still marks the margins of certain texts, sharp, deliberate, almost defiant. To see his ink fading is to feel both the fragility and endurance of legacy, the reminder that while matter decays, intention survives. Each annotation, each underline is a conversation continued across centuries, a dialogue between the living and the dead, between the dreamer and the dream. The silence of the library is not emptiness, it is communion, a gathering of thoughts suspended in time. As dusk descends, the house transforms again. Shadows elongate along corridors, soft light pools in corners, and the air grows thick with a sense of remembrance. The tapestries seem to move slightly, stirred by invisible breath, and the portraits watch with the same knowing gaze they have always had. It is easy, in such moments, to imagine that the house is alive, not in the way of walls and stone, but with memory, with longing. The walls have absorbed too much to ever be inert. They resonate faintly with emotion, with fragments of music, with the hushed voices of those who once whispered beneath these ceilings. When silence falls, it is never complete. It hums, low and steady, like the sound of a heartbeat. Remembered. Curators lock the doors as night settles over the estate. Yet even in darkness, the manor does not sleep. Moonlight spills across the façade, turning windows into pale mirrors. Inside, objects gleam faintly, the reflection of silver, the curve of porcelain, the edges of glass cases that hold relics of another time. It is as if the house itself remembers what it once was, a place of laughter and control, of obsession and solitude, of triumph gilded with melancholy. The wind presses against the windows, carrying whispers through unseen cracks, a language of ghosts. It speaks not of haunting, but of endurance. The house endures because people remember it, because hands continue to tend it, because within its dust lies meaning. There is a strange comfort in knowing that decay and devotion coexist here. The patina on the banisters, the faint scratches on the parquet floors, the dulling of gilt, these are not flaws but testaments. They speak of touch, of passage, of human presence. Every imperfection is an imprint of life. Perfection, after all, cannot tell a story. Only the flawed, the worn, the change can carry memory. And so, as restorers dust and polish, as time continues to soften edges and fade colors, the manor becomes not less, but more alive. A palimpsest of lives layered one upon another, their collective striving for beauty transmuted into something tender, almost holy. The air at night is still, yet not empty. The scent of wax lingers, mingled with the faint echo of roses from the garden. Somewhere, a clock ticks, its rhythm a quiet heartbeat, marking the passage of time through the body of the house. It reminds us that nothing endures unchanged, not the flowers, not the art, not even the walls that hold them. And yet, through care, through remembrance, through the unending dialogue between past and present, something greater survives. Not perfection, but presence. Not grandeur, but grace. The legacy of Waddesdon is not simply wealth or beauty, but the delicate tension between what was created and what continues to be loved, between what has faded and what remains luminous. Morning will come again. Light will spill once more through tall windows, dust will rise and shimmer, and visitors will enter, drawn by a beauty they cannot fully name. They will walk through rooms unaware of the countless hands that have shaped what they see, the lives given quietly to preserve what time tries to erase. And in their wonder, in their silence, they will become part of the story to another layer of breath, another echo within the endless rhythm of creation and loss. For in Waddesdon, everything stone, dust, memory, and light exists in delicate balance, a living testament to the truth that beauty, however fragile, never truly disappears. It only changes its form, waiting patiently for someone to see it again.